Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Nancy Savoca, a writer and director who broke out in 1989 with the spiky romantic drama True Love, starring Annabella Sciorra and Ron Eldard, and followed it with two remarkable films starring Lili Taylor, Dogfight and Household Saints. It's possible you haven't seen any of those, because they've been effectively out of circulation for a while now. Household Saints, in particular, was considered a lost film for more than a decade until it was recently rediscovered, and now a new restoration produced by Milestone Films is back in the world. It's making its Toronto premiere this Friday, January 19th at the Revue Cinema, with additional screenings Sunday and next Wednesday, and you should go see it. Nancy picked another film that was in danger of disappearing, Euzhan Palcy's Sugarcane Alley, the 1983 drama about a boy named Jose who lives in colonial Martinique with his grandmother, who works in the sugarcane fields and insists he go to school so he can do something else with his life. And the more time we spend with Jose, the more we understand the world in which he lives. A world of casual exploitation and imbalance, a world where knowing the rules just keeps you trapped inside the game. But there's also wonder and illumination if you know where to look, and Palcy makes sure we see it. Sugarcane Alley was similarly out of circulation for a really long time, and while a 4K restoration played the festival circuit in 2021, the film hasn't yet resurfaced on disc or in theaters. But Nancy still has the VHS tape. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It's funny because there's, I'm sure everybody who gets asked this question is like, like so many movies go through your mind. It's like, which one? I can talk about this one and that one and the movies we love and the list of the movies we love. And I never put a hierarchical order because that would be, I would change it within an hour, and then the other one would go on. But I've been talking a lot lately with friends who love movies as well. And we talk about how we have this dialogue with the movies we love. And over time, how you could still keep talking about them. And the best, richest movies, the ones that hit you really hard, are the ones that, as you're learning things in life, you could just go back to them and go like, oh, wow, now I have a new relationship with this movie. And it just keeps going and going. So I picked Sugarcane Alley because it came out in 1983. I was just out of film school, and I had never seen a movie that touched on people I grew up with. And so, so you're looking at this white girl who's done like Italian movies, right? And you're going like, oh, I know who she is. I grew up in the Southeast Bronx, and I grew up, I want to say, really culturally rich. Because my parents were immigrants. My mom was from Argentina. My father had grown up in Argentina, but his family was Sicilian. And we lived in this neighborhood that was this just mix of Afro-Caribbean, African-American, Puerto Rican, Dominican. So a lot of Caribbean folks. And then we were not that. But this was our neighborhood, and these were our neighbors, and my mom had girlfriends, and we were all on top of each other kind of with these stories. And the lady that we rented my apartment from, she was from Martinique. So my landlady, Emily, used to tell me stories about Martinique. And she had photo albums, and she would show me pictures of people in Martinique and how everybody always went to France for school. And she spoke French, and she taught me a little bit of French, and she taught me how to play piano. So I had all these stories of Martinique. And I, not for a minute would ever have thought I'd seen it on screen. And so when Sugarcane Alley came out, like I went to see it in the theater, and I felt like all those stories like kind of came to life. And then but the thing that really, really stuck with me is not just was it a reflection of someone I loved, but it ended up being a reflection of my childhood in a weird way, because obviously I did not grow up in Martinique. I didn't grow up in that neighborhood. We were not talking about plantations, sugarcane workers, any of that. But there was a roughness to childhood that I did experience. And there was a very strict upbringing that had to do with, if you're of a certain class, you had to show that you were classier than that. And good behavior was a marker. So all of that, I just understood it and took it in. And mind you, I was right out of film school. So I was so grateful to see it, because these were reflections. I was trying to figure out, can I tell stories that come from someplace deep inside me and not just are, intellectual exercises of film or whatever, but that like hit me in the heart and the gut. And this movie did that. and has haunted me. So stayed with me as that kind of love from the first time I saw it. And Euzhan Palcy, we can talk about what she did with it, because I started analyzing the things she did with it. And then I revisited the movie post Black Lives Matter, George Floyd. I read Stamped from the beginning, started reading about history, got very interested in history of the Americas and slavery, and then went back to the movie for that and found more stuff. So this movie is rich.
Yeah, I am ashamed to admit I've only seen it twice, once theatrically and then once when the DVD came out. So that would have been 2000.
I don't know. Was there a DVD? Because this is what I just saw it on.
Oh, wow.
I bought it when it came out. This is the VHS tape. I've lost the cover, and this is what loving a movie looks like when you've loved it for a long time. It's a little beat up, but I actually watched it again last night to remind myself of some things. But I watched it, like 2 years ago, and before that, just throughout. When I feel like I want to look for the heart of things, because she hit it.
Yeah. It's what you were saying about coming back to a film as you age and live is something that a friend of mine, John Harkness, always said about the rules of the game. It's like he would revisit it like clockwork every 8 or 9 years because he would be different. The film is fixed, right? The film is a presentation of a story that has already happened and been recorded and is fixed in time, but you change. And his take on rules of the game was that he found himself sympathizing with a different character every time. And he wasn't trying. It would just happen. Which is probably the best thing you can say about any work of art.
Yeah.
There was a DVD of Sugarcane Alley. It went, New Yorker Films released it in, I think, 2005, and it went almost immediately out of print.
Yeah, I know. I didn't even know that. I had no idea. Okay, so I would have bought it.
I think it lived for like a year. You can find it for sale used, but people are asking hundreds of dollars for it at this point.
Please don't get me started. Don't get me started. Yes.
We'll circle back to the lost film thing. But the other thing about it is that there is a new restoration. There was a 4K restoration that TIFF premiered in 2021. I think it might have played Cannes before we had it, but it played at TIFF. I managed to miss it. But there's a terrific 45-minute, 50-minute in conversation on YouTube with Ioana Vicente, who was the co-head and co-artistic director at the time, and Euzhan Palcy.
Oh, I need to see that. I've seen interviews with her, but I haven't seen it with Ioana Vicente. Okay.
It's terrific. And Palcy talks about everything. She goes into detail on her entire career, but she starts by talking about Sugarcane Alley for a good 15 or 20 minutes. And the thing that amazes me every time is that, and it's how I found the film in the first place, was that Truffaut was the godfather. That he was the one who said, you can do this. And you mentioned films about childhood having a specific feel. And as soon as I saw Sugarcane Alley, because I would have been 21 or 22, I think, and I was on a Truffaut kick, and it was playing at the Bloor Cinema, which was the wonderful rep house in Toronto that no longer plays. But to see it about a year after discovering The 400 Blows and instantly understanding what Truffaut saw, and that his fingerprints aren't on it. He helped get it made, but he refused to interfere or intervene in the story because he knew it wasn't his to tell.
That's a filmmaker as mentor. I love hearing that, and that you see that. Yes, absolutely. That's somebody who understands, the work that you do, who does that same work and knows that you leave that person to do their work. Yeah. You're the cheerleader.
Exactly. I mean, you. I guess it's a sort of producer role, right? You introduce people to the money, or to the incubation of the script.
Oh, you put the good housekeeping seal of approval on someone that people are afraid to take a risk on. So you just kind of give the folks, like don't worry, this person's good. Yeah. This person won't run away or fail or whatever. Yeah, she'll make you look good, which is the most cynical way of doing it, right? Like, if you associate with this artist, you're going to look great, but that's how art happens. Yeah. Hey, listen, and by any means possible. And it's remarkable to watch Sugarcane Alley now, or to revisit it the way I did, which was through the conversations and as many clips as I could find, because the VHS tape in the TIFF reference library is so delicate that I'm afraid I'll ruin it if I press play. I'm afraid of my tape too. I was last night. I was like, I'm going to sit. I'm not going to stop it at any point. So but yeah.
Yeah, we're old enough to remember. You kids listening today, you have no idea how delicate it was to watch, to like the relationship you have with physical media when it's tape instead of disc. You can scratch a DVD, but you can kill a VHS
Original
tape.
tape. Rewind, rewind. Yeah.
Stretched out or get tracking
Yeah.
noise. But like now I'm regretting that I didn't watch the tape because you would see it through the veil of memory that archival quality gives you, right? Like you're getting a version of the film. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
widescreen, it's in mono. It
Mhm.
probably resolution does not look so great on a modern day monitor.
Oh my God, no, it looks like it's definitely not the best. Like I was so lucky to see it in the theater. But my experience with this movie has been post that one theatrical experience, and then everything else. When I've ever looked back on it, I pull out my trusty tape and with trembling hands, put it, connect the VHS player, right? Because
Yeah.
we don't have that connected all the time. It's too much stuff. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, mine runs through a DVD recorder, which is the only way I could plug it into my receiver.
it's something. But yeah, I mean, I want to talk about like what Euzhan did
Please, yeah.
in this her first feature. First of all, I just appreciate the story of not being able to get it made. I can imagine the conversations of trying to get this financed, of like, this is not a universal story. Ah, look at me. It spoke to me and my, even if I had not had the childhood experiences, the understanding of what parents expect of their children, definitely in terms of behavior. The grandmother had the education thing that she was pushing for. My parents did not push for that, though. But seeing this movie and appreciating what she went through, the detail of whether it's production design to recreate that Martinique in the 20s and 30s. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the exact time on it because I go by the cars,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
deliberately vague too. I think it takes
Oh,
place over a stretch of years, but it
it's
feels like late
interesting,
20s,
yeah.
early 30s.
Right from the cars, it feels like 20s and early 30s, and I know, which is interesting because I know the movies like post-slavery, which is like mid 1800s, but then it was still plantation based, right? Because
Mm.
and that's the thing historically, right? The plantations kept going, and the lifestyle didn't change much. You would get paid 10, 12 cents to work or whatever. But the fact that I read later said she took people who worked in the fields and brought them on set, very similarly to the way we brought neighborhood people on set to Wilmington, North Carolina, to live there and pretend we're in Little Italy. She brought people that were from the countryside to to this location where she was shooting in, so that many of her actors, I don't know who was a trained actor and who was not, but I'll tell you something, those kids were not doing commercials. You know what I mean? And if you
Yeah.
look at the scenes that were just children, which many of the scenes were just children, and you track their day when they get so thrilled that the parents are going off to work so that they could stay home and start trouble. Oh my God, like they were not thinking about that camera at all. They were doing their thing.
Yeah, it's incredibly naturalistic. And I remember thinking it was almost too rambunctious and it became briefly hard to follow just because there's so much activity, so much stuff is going on. Not just the kids, but the farm work. And then in the night scenes, there's just, like these incredible long
The
shots, these
drinking, dancing scenes,
but
the end of day,
why?
right?
Yeah,
Big
why
celebration.
busy shots where it feels like every single person in the island has arrived in the frame, not just in the space, but in the frame. They're crowding for attention. And then we have Jose's conversations foregrounded with people, and there's all this life going on in the background.
Yes. And I think it's sort of interesting because, again, it gives you this feeling. And this is, again, where my connection comes in, is like that community
Mm.
becomes very, very important. Whereas again, in my life, I've moved through different social circles. And the one that was most separated from me was when I lived in the suburbs. And then everyone has their space because you
Yeah.
can afford your space. So you have your space. And I would create parties in my backyard. I was known as that person that had the loud parties. I think I just kept recreating community wherever I could find it because I had it as a child, and I see it in this movie so beautifully rendered. And as you say, the foreground background when Jose is talking to Meduse, I'm going to say all the
Oh, the
French names
conversation
wrong.
about going to
The old
Africa.
man, yes, going which right bookends the movie. Going,
Mm.
we are going to go back to Africa. When we die, we go back to Africa. And that man was actually the person who not necessarily planted seeds, but allowed who Jose was going to become. Like really brought that out in him, brought the poet and the writer out in him, because he too was a poet and a writer. He recognized it in the kid, and he would feed him things.
Yeah, their rapport is really lovely. And the mysticism that surrounds it, which is fully self-generated. The movie doesn't do anything to imply, magic realism or anything. There's none of the exoticism that you might get from, let's say, a white filmmaker telling this story. It's simply the poetry coming out through their connection, right? Like, it's part of it is the language, but part of it is the way they relate to each other physically. That's Palsy knowing where to put the camera and when to leave them alone and let the acting do the work.
Yes.
But that scene, that's another thing I've never forgotten. Like, even though I haven't seen the movie full through, I will never see Africa, but when I die, I will go back there. Yeah. Is like that's the end of a Rumi poem. It's just so beautiful. And it's not even the button of the scene. It's just this bit of wisdom. And you can watch Jose take it in, not understand it fully. And the movie lets us know he'll get there. Like, he'll understand it someday. And maybe this is what we're watching. We're seeing his reflections of it artistically. Yeah. Maybe we're watching an adaptation of the book he's going to write or the poems he's going to write. Yeah. But that was the only way I could make sense of some of the choices, because it feels like it's it's a period piece, right? But it feels like a memory rather than a reconstruction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, even as you say those lines, like, it kind of chokes me up, because I think, so the universality of this thing is, some people got to these lands, because they had a dream and they wanted to. Some people got to these lands because they were kidnapped. Mm-hmm. Some immigrants got to this land because they were really scared being home, or needed something they didn't have at home, and there was more of a desperation. And for the people that are here, not necessarily because they wanted to be here, but because they had no choice, that idea of going back, and when you do it, and when you're gonna be able to realize that, and it's kind of knowing that if you're not going to do it in this lifetime, she's like, really just, I would hear my mom talk like that,
Really?
going back. And she really wanted to go back, but couldn't do it. They tried a couple of times for my parents to go back, and they couldn't. And they came here for medical reasons. So it wasn't for looking for the dream. It wasn't there. So it was very, like, again, these are the things that hit me of those characters and how they speak.
Did you feel that the first time you saw it, or did it take a while? Was that one of the things that emerged?
I could articulate it later, but I was super moved by the movie. Like, yeah, that movie killed me. That line, and the fact that it ends on that line, just that got me at the screening. And I remember seeing it by myself. So I just sat there like crying a little bit by myself. And I always used to go to the afternoon screenings. I'm just trying to think, at that point, I was probably, I might've been going back to NYU to edit my student films that took me forever to finish. So, yeah.
Yeah, I could derail this into account. Did you see it at the Quad? Was it Lincoln Center? Because I could do that all day.
I am so bad. But I remember that probably in the Village, all of those movies. But you know what? Sometimes I'd follow the movie where it was playing, so we could find out where it was playing. But it was when it came out. And I just remember that my playground, we were talking about this because we premiered at IFC last night. My playground was the movie theaters of the Village, like Film Forum, the Waverly, IFC was the Waverly, Bleecker House, and a Bleecker Street Cinema. And just, I would have classes, and then I could step out between classes and catch a movie, which was, again, I'm wealthy with experience. I'm so lucky.
God, the greatest place in the world. The sense of New York in the 80s is a movie mecca too, because the cinema culture was there. That's just something that's gone now, where you could stumble into this incredible first feature from a French woman about Martinique that had no, I'm not even sure, like no commercial prospects at all.
No, this is the thing. And that's what I so appreciate about, well, my brother was the one who got me started watching movies that I had no business watching, and we were in the Bronx. So we'd take the subway down and go to all these theaters and watch these movies. Like I didn't even know what I was watching because I just wanted to get out of the house, and I was allowed to go out with my brother. I wasn't necessarily allowed, but very strict upbringing. So I wasn't necessarily allowed to go with other people. For some reason, they trusted my brother and they never should have. But in the 70s, it was like, I actually saw, Lena Wertmuller, and the weird thing is that when I went to film school and, and none of this was sort of deliberate, but I got some kind of message. I didn't study women filmmakers.
Really?
The things that were taught to
at
me
the time,
was all the guys. So I had no problem with that because I wasn't thinking that way, but I was like, yes, I love, everyone they were teaching me about. And then on the side, I had brought already to my film school education, Sidney Lumet and John Cassavetes was the reason why I wanted to make films, because I saw husbands on TV. So I was aware of the men making movies, but I actually was watching Agnes Varda. Vagabond. I was right out of film school for Vagabond, and so I was watching the women, Maria Luisa Benberg, I, the Worst of All, and her, and We Don't Want to Talk About It. And those movies all meant something to me because they did have, again, they were all different. It wasn't just because some chick made it that it had a chick-like feeling to it. They were bringing these stories that were just varied. And I just ate everybody up, but did not acknowledge that through my education. My education was like separate. It was weird. So I had this disconnect between the movies I adored and then this wonderful films that I was shown in school. So interesting.
That's really fascinating. I went to film school. I was there in 87, 88. And the only film we saw in our theory class, no, it was our production class, directed by a woman, was Daisies.
Wow.
Weird, strangely enough. And that was supposed to represent the entire Eastern European avant-garde. Wow. Which I suppose in 1987, I guess it does. But
wow, and when you think of like all the stuff, including Sugarcane Alley, that was out by that point, right?
Yeah. We didn't see anything made after 1970. Sorry, that's not true. We saw one film in our theory class that was made after 1970. I have no idea why. It was simply, we had a 35 millimeter projection, we had theater, everything.
So you didn't see Lena Wertmuller, you didn't see Agnes Varda, you didn't see, it's like.
No, and Claire would have made perfect sense. But no, maybe part of it was because they were slightly out of circulation. Maybe Canada was harder to get prints. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's really, I think, okay, the only woman, I did see a woman director in film school, and it was Maya Deren.
Oh,
I did.
Yeah, you know what? We probably did too. I think we definitely saw Meshes.
She was the one. Yes. Yeah.
But again, Sugarcane Alley would never have come up.
So it's wonderful, to just be exposed to it. I was very, very, very lucky that I came up at the time when these were happening. So it was cool.
Yeah, and we had it on the Digital TIFF site for rental when the 4K came out in 2021, and it's gone now. I'm not sure where the rights are. I'm sure it'll come out. If Criterion's not working on it, they've done something terribly wrong with their emission statement. But there's been no word of it for a while. Part of that is because New Yorker Films was sold to, I think, Milestone, and Milestone was then subcontracted somewhere.
Milestone, we're with Milestone, and that Milestone's with Kino Lorber.
That's what it is. So maybe it'll come out there.
Well, I'm going to ask who has it now, because I feel, I think at some point I didn't know it was restored, because we were talking about it as a missing movie, because I was saying, well, I can't find it. Anybody, raise your hand if you can find it. And so, now you got me, I'm going to look for this to see where it's at.
Oh, by all means, I'm making inquiries on this end as well.
Thank you. Let's do it. Let's make some noise on this movie, boy.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I revisited Joel and Ethan Coen's Intolerable Cruelty and the Lady Killers, for reasons, and checked out Arrow Video's Conan Chronicles, a new box set built around 4K restorations of Conan the Barbarian and Conan the Destroyer. Sign up for our 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Sendcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I still like writing about them. Come check it out. to pivot into the missing movies aspect of it, one of the reasons we're talking is because you've got a restoration, honestly, a triumphant restoration. It looks gorgeous of Household Saints, which has been out of circulation for how long exactly?
Well, let's see. Can you date it to whatever the dates were when VHS went to DVD?
That was 97, 98.
Okay, it didn't happen. So like, and when you think about it, many movies just stayed on VHS. And those films, which is what I saw personally with Household Saints, is it would play on television every year around Easter. Mm-hmm. And that slowly, as the years went by, kind of like faded away. VHS cassettes were not sold, so that kind of faded away. And then I would see it like for sale on eBay for like a couple of $100, which I said, well, who's going to buy that? That kind of faded away. Then you'd see it for 99 cents, and then that faded away. So, and then eventually we had only the 2 prints that we had housed at UCLA, that we found, prints that accidentally came our way, 35 millimeter prints, which we housed in UCLA. So we had 2 prints, and then we learned those 2 prints were damaged. So we ended up not having any prints at all. And that's when our search began for the movie.
I know it happens. I still have 30 or 40 Laserdiscs of films that never made it out on other formats, or for whatever reason were different when they did. And my hoarder's mentality, my archival mentality has kept me tracking things here and there. But the idea that, I mean, there isn't even a Blu-ray of Dogfight, right? As long as we're talking about your film specifically.
Actually, okay, so this is what's happened without any plans at all. I had nothing to do with this. Okay. It's just incredible. The first 3 films I made have been chosen to be restored this year and are coming out in April. Last year they were restored and are coming out in April, this April. The first 3. So True Love, Dogfight, Household Saints on Blu-ray.
That is so great. I'm so glad.
Oh, no, I'm like gobsmacked. I'm like, really? Because we were working on trying to find Household Saints when we learned that the other movies were being restored. And I'm like, what is going on here with these movies? So I'm very, very, very happy.
That's happy. Wonderful. Well, I mean, what it is a reclamation, right? Like it's the thing that happens when you stick around.
Stick around long enough. Absolutely. I say, it's like, I'm like, like post-apocalyptic, I'll be here. But it's really beautiful because Household Saints premiered last night at IFC. We were at the New York Film Festival. We've shown it in Philadelphia because the Lightbox Foundation is the Lightbox Films, and the Naples Foundation were the people that funded this restoration. So we did a screening there. Just came back from the Brattle in Vermont. The audiences are mixed, young and old.
I was going to ask, yeah.
And that is so satisfying. And hearing the people that loved it back then come up and, who've been asking me over the years, when's it coming out on DVD? When's it coming out on DVD? I'm like, I don't know. Ask, somebody, not me, because I don't know. And then the young people who are seeing it for the first time, and some older people who are seeing it for the first time, it's just really beautiful. And I feel like now I'm old enough that I just see everything micro, macro. So micro, I enjoy it for myself, but macro, I just go like film, film from sort of recent past, if you consider that we're 100 and something years old, is that's available for people to enjoy is great.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to have a dip into the programming side and fool around with the possibilities and just see what you can pull out and what sources exist. And we screened Catherine Bigelow's Blue Steel in October.
How awesome.
It was great. Awesome. It kicked off this whole series I programmed of 80s movies that used the cover of genre to comment on social political stuff that's still relevant. And Blue Steel, I mean, it's all about not only misogyny and propaganda, but it's about the moment that we're in right now somehow.
Yes.
And the like all of those things that Bigelow was playing with, and then you read the reviews at the time and people are like, this is really overheated and silly. It's like, but it's a nightmare. But to watch that play for an audience on a 35 millimeter print that had never seen the movie at all. That was the thing that stunned me. The people who showed up to these movies, and it's stuff like RoboCop and The Stuff, and real Martha Coolidge's Real Genius, which predicts drone strikes.
Show. Wow,
it was a lot of fun.
There.
Yeah,
wow.
It was a lot of fun. But what amazed me was, for the most part, the audience was in their 20s. And they'd never seen the films. There were a handful of people, like for the RoboCop screening, which was 120 odd people, maybe 40 of them had seen it at all.
See, this is what to me is like so important about showing the older films to younger people, because we don't realize it. I certainly didn't think about it till recently, that I was fed movies since I'm pre-verbal. Pre-verbal, I was fed movies, and I heard people talking about movies in the way that family talks about movie, like, oh, don't go down the stairs, you're going to get killed. Like they'd yell, like there was interaction with the TV in my case. Or my sisters would drag me to see A Hard Day's Night, which blew my mind because I was 5 and the theater was dark, and this train, our elevated train track ran right outside the theater. So it shook like an earthquake, and the girls inside the theater were screaming.
Right.
So all of this, it's very interactive relationship with films. And when I think of like, even my kids, I would like, show them films, but they didn't go to a movie theater to see it with a bunch of strangers. And it's so wonderful and beautiful. And these young people that you're showing it to are bringing their dialogue to it. And finding things that we won't find because we're sort of reacting to, like, I remember when I saw this. But again, if you keep current with your relationship with a movie, it's going to change. And if you're brand new to it, living in this world, you're going to relate to it from this lens.
In the present moment, exactly, awesome. Yeah. Well, Sugarcane Alley is one where I was really curious, and I'm sorry I didn't get to see it again just this time, because I want to see how it plays now in light of the dialogue on colonization, because it's all there. I know it's in there.
It is so there. I feel like my interest as I gotten older, because my family's Latin American, they coming from Argentina, and there's so little that is truthfully spoken about their history.
Sure.
There's like a whole, it's a white country. Oh no, 1/3 of the population Afro-Argentine. We should talk about this. But like I look at the map from north to south of this mass of land, and we barely scratched the surface of what happened and what's still happening as a result of how we started. And it's just fascinating. It's fascinating because now, we're becoming like this multicultural, multiracial, because we've been now together for so long. And with it comes all the hard stuff of the things we don't talk about, and the things that are to be celebrated if you're combining all these pasts together. So that all those things, and showing movies like this would be a great start, of a conversation, I say.
I think so. I mean, I've never understood it. Like I was saying before, I've never understood the effect of introducing an audience to a film until I was actually showing it to people for literally the first time. And you just get to experience the way people take it in. And the thing I've always said, like even back, way back when my grandfather owned a movie theater as a kid, I never had a chance in a normal life. But the sense of sitting in a dark space with strangers, everyone watching the exact same stimulus, right? Like the only thing that's different is the angle of your chair. And every single person is receiving that differently on the other side of the glass. And that was the lesson that I learned when I must have been 9. And it's something I've never forgotten, is that everybody is having a different response. And unless the person is a monster, the response is emotionally correct for them, right? Unless you're coming out thinking, oh, there were too many Black people in that movie about Martinique. Mm-hmm. That's on you.
Where are the French people? Where are the French people at? But it's funny. And you just made me think of this book I read in Seattle when we were doing Dogfight. I'm not going to remember the writer's name, but he was a local guy, and he was talking about the closing of a bar in a neighborhood in Seattle, and he called the book The Great Good Place. And it's about how we need gathering spaces for people to come together, like as a democracy in a way. Mm-hmm. And I think movie theaters, especially if you have Q&As after, where you can watch a movie, bringing your own perspective, and then within the safety, in a way, of that a film and that story, you can agree or disagree with other people and have a conversation, and then therefore air your philosophies and your views and not kill each other like on the internet, because you have a story that couches everybody.
Yeah.
You know, I think that idea of like, and movie theaters, the fact that I hear that there's interest, especially with a younger generation, in coming back. I'm an optimist by nature, which is what they say, an optimist is always disappointed, but I'm an optimist. But I keep thinking, well, that's a really good sign, because as long as you get a bunch of people who don't know each other together, that's healthy.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm just trying to think about how a modern audience would receive Household Saints, which like that must have felt like a resurrection last night, because it's a film that deals with the old world and the new world, and it's challenging people on their expectations of one another and what the storytelling is. And I mean, I'll set this up in the intro so people can understand it, but your story pivots quite radically halfway through. I mean, I remember seeing it at the time and thinking, oh, she's going for it. And really, you pull focus and switch it to somebody else's story entirely. But that second story is informed by the hour that we've spent
You could
learning.
not have the second if you didn't have the first, because that gives you the foundation for who she is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where she comes from, like not where she comes from, but what shaped her. What world brought her,
and what ancestral ties shape her, because then the person that might have shaped her the most isn't even know her, you know.
Yeah.
So that's where all the sort of magic, which I think is very like life magic, that happens. But it's a good question. It's how these audiences are receiving it, and again, I'm just gobsmacked by the new relationships that people are entering this movie with. There are the fans who are remembering it, but then seeing something new. And then there's like in Philly, there was this young person who raised their hand and they said, I am Teresa. You know, I relate to her because, and this is someone who identifies as they, and they said, I know what it's like to not belong to anybody in your tribe and feel on the outside of it, which is, you know, what she goes through.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, everybody brings their situation to it. And to me, that's the best way to watch a movie, is that you are active in it. You're not just receiving a story and sitting back and, you can munch on the popcorn. I like the popcorn. But you're working in a way that's very satisfying. Like you're engaged in it and thinking and being, you're angry at it, you're loving it, it's transporting you, it's got you confused. That's okay. Like all that is good.
Yeah. It's mystical. Like it really is. It's something that no other art form, maybe opera, but even then it's keyed differently. Like it's something that only film offers, I think, is that chance to like enter a dream state with everyone, sort of
because the two things I think I had growing up as art forms that were constantly fed to me were music and movies, because I think those were the accessible art forms, and then television, because my parents came here and finally got a TV. But those art forms of the visual and the audio, both like do this number on your feelings that you can't put your finger on. But the films, I think the fact that you've got something to look at and enter, like music, you could put on in the background. Film, what breaks my heart a lot about television is you could put it on in the background.
Sure.
And I don't like that, which is why I can't, if I don't commit to watching something, I feel weird about putting it on. I've done it. I'll confess, I've done it. I don't walk away. I feel like I've missed a lot.
Yeah, I know people do it, and it angers me. I'm just on a gut level.
Oh, yeah.
And you as a filmmaker, even more so, I'm sure. Like, or you know how hard it is to put something together for people to watch. The number of people involved.
That part doesn't even come to play, because to me, it's like, look, I got my stuff out of it. Like, is this movie for you or not for you? If your attention wanders, maybe it's not for you. So I kind of go like whatever on that. Although I'm a Leo and I have a big ego, that part of it, I'm like so satisfied by having that the movie darn exists,
right,
that I'm okay with that. But it is like this idea of like, for me, I more go into the audience mode of like, when I put something on, if I'm able to like look at my phone and my computer, it's like a different relationship to the thing. It's like somebody talking and you're not really listening, or you're having a conversation about really. And aren't we all guilty of that these days? Because we've got all these things calling our attention. So that's why I'm so grateful to sit in a movie theater and be like, really, like, kidnap me, please, kidnap me, tie me up in a chair so I can't look at anything else but this screen. I'm happy.
Oh yeah, no, to be transported. That's all I ever want.
Yeah.
And it's a slightly awkward question just in terms of how far away we got from Sugarcane Alley in the first place. But the last question, the way out on the podcast, is always if there is anything of the film you chose that's made its way into your work, if there's something that you've lifted or homaged or outright stolen from Sugarcane Alley. And I was thinking about your filmography. I don't really see it, but there is a sort of ethno-realism that you bring to your films. I mean, The World of True Love is so... There's a version of that movie where everybody is 20% more stereotypical caricature, and you found a way not to do that at a time when everyone was doing that, right? Like the late 80s was not a great time for Italian-American representation.
Oh, God.
Post-Godfather and all that. And
people kept like comparing us, and I was like, oh, God, no. What Euzhan Palcy taught me was to be Margaret Mead when I make a movie about myself and a culture that I understand. So even though I feel like she presented something she knew very, very well, but she also had this binary way of thinking, so that she could be in it, of it, and then at the same time understand that she was going to present the story to people who had no idea.
Right.
And I think I did steal that from her, and it influenced me, and it gave me courage to go there and do that, so that I could totally say, don't be afraid to be who you are, but do keep an eye, because I've seen sometimes movies that are so inside their world that me as a foreigner, I'm kind of going like, okay, I got to get in here. The filmmaker has sort of created this bubble for themselves, but I'm going to get in there to experience this thing. Whereas she left that door open, but still was herself doing it. And I think I got that from her very much in a way I didn't get from anybody else.
Yeah, the worlds you build feel personal and specific and universal in the same time, but it's the lack of explanation, right? There's no exposition about who these people are when we meet them. I assume
that you're okay and that you're with me. I assume, but I'm aware that you're with me. And I think that's what she gave to us, is that she knew that, Sugarcane, who knew that story? Martinique, very, very particular. And that paradox that to this day, I don't know how it works, that you can be so particular that the more detailed you are, if Martine, pulls her pipe out of her bra, or the treat she gives Jose out of her bra, and I recognize that movement from the women in my family, all those things that she gives me to chew on, but at the same time, I can say, it's not my story, but it is my story. And yeah, that's, I don't know how she did it. I don't know how it works when I do it, but the more people wouldn't give us money, we couldn't get funding for True Love because it was not universal enough. And yet when it played in festivals, this one young man, I'll never forget, a student from China, raised his hand and said, I want to bring this back to my country because this is exactly what weddings are like in China. So we're like, okay, universal.
My thanks to Nancy Savoca, whose lovely feature Household Saints returns to Toronto this Friday at the Revue Cinema in an excellent 4K restoration from Milestone Films, with additional shows Sunday and the following Wednesday. Tickets are available now at revuecinema.ca. Thanks also to Juan Medina. He knows what he did. Nancy's not on social media, and good for her, honestly, but you can follow Household Saints' progress at milestonefilms.com, and, well, you can't find Sugarcane Alley anywhere at the moment, which is the problem, but, we're holding out hope Criterion is cooking up something for the restoration. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.